Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnerships with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. Smithville Fiber Internet Security Solutions and Voice in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Bunger and Robertson Attorneys at Law, utilizing 75 years of experience, knowledge, and resources to help individuals and families recover in personal injury matters. Information at lawbr.com. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk, Duke Energy is proposing a rate hike that would cost the average customer more than $300 a year.
I try to budget anyway, but it'll be a lot of sacrifices that would need to be made.
Ahead, Duke makes its justification for the increase, while Bloomington leaders sound the alarm about how the hike could affect local residents. Some residents are spending their summer working on their reading skills.
Mostly just so that they're better prepared for the next grade that they're going into, especially their speed of reading and reading comprehension.
Coming up, the pressure to pass the state's high-stakes third-grade reading assessment. And buckle up, it's been a wild week for the state's Republican Party. Our statehouse reporter joins us with the latest, and he explains how Democrats are trying to seize on this time of transition. All that plus the latest news headlines right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. Well, Duke Energy wants to raise electricity rates for the second time in 5 years. The company says it needs to pay for grid improvements, but a growing number of consumer advocates, politicians, and ratepayers say Duke's proposal is too steep. Ethan Sandwise reports.
As a utility, Duke must appeal to the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission before setting new rates.
Those entities, those monopolies, are subject to regulation through these regulatory bodies, with the idea being these regulatory bodies, these regulatory agencies, are a surrogate to competition. It's an uncompetitive marketplace.
Duke says it will use that money to cover grid upgrades, replacing wood poles with steel that can better withstand storms, and expanding power lines to an additional 60,000 customers it expects by 2025.
We know that utility costs can be a major part of a household budget. That's one reason why, since 2020, we have held the line on day-to-day operating costs, while we've made investments of $1.6 billion in improvements to our system.
Any increase is supposed to cover maintenance costs and improvements, but the utility can also earn profits up to an amount agreed upon by the commission. This year, Duke seeks another $492 million revenue increase.
We can use that, for instance, for dividends to pay our shareholders, as one example. And that return is regular. It's not guaranteed.
That rate increase will roll out over 2 years if passed. The company estimates a customer using 1,000 kilowatt hours each month would pay an additional $28. But the Citizens Action Coalition says it would be closer to $42. The coalition's estimate looks at current bills, while Duke's figures are based on its predictions for changing fuel prices and bill trackers.
Not saying they are lying, but that's a little misleading, a little disingenuous. All we are doing is saying, here is your bill today, your total bill, trackers included. Here's what Duke Energy Indiana wants your bill to be. That's the $42 a month.
The problem isn't theoretical for Eliza Carey. She's a breadwinner raising 5 kids as a paraprofessional at Templeton Elementary. Her electric bill for the last month was more than $230.
I try to budget anyway, but it'll be a lot of sacrifices that would need to be made. Having 5 kiddos, they eat a lot, not cutting their food, I would say, per se, but being really budget friendly.
She's already taking advantage of Duke's interest-free payment plan, but she's still struggling to stay afloat. Carrie asks her kids to keep the lights off during the day to save power.
I'm to the point now where, of course they can't go anywhere during the summer, but trying to hack basically cutting my power off completely from the circuit breaker and just leaving my fridge on during the day.
If Carrie can no longer make payments, she could be disconnected from the grid. Indiana is one of 31 states in which utility companies can shut off electricity during a heat wave. Other Duke customers spoke up Thursday at a hearing with the IURC at the Monroe Convention Center. Almost 60 signed up to give testimony to be entered on the record.
I don't think it's justified to increase this profit margin for Duke because they're still going to be able to get the equity they need, because it's a very low-risk investment.
My son and I have been forced to live in the dark in 80-plus degree temperatures in an effort to make the current energy costs as affordable as possible.
Bloomington City Council members penned a letter to the state utility consumer counselor this week saying Duke's increase would decrease the safety and stability of its consumers.
I noted that the Indiana University Energy Justice Lab reported that Duke made over 25,000 disconnections in its service territory last year. That can, of course, then turn into debt collections and other issues. So just highlighting that that's the context through which we're very concerned about the potential impacts.
The letter goes on to criticize Duke's sustainability efforts, calling them too narrow. The council is asking for a modified proposal. Bloomington Mayor Carrie Thompson plans to add her signature early next week. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Ethan Sandweiss.
The IURC is taking written comments from the public until July 5th. After that, the rate case proceeds like a civil court case with lawyers for Duke and interveners cross-examining technical witnesses. A regulatory decision is expected early next year. The state's Republican Party is in a period of transition. Two top party officials are leaving their post, and things aren't going Mike Braun's way in his attempt to become the state's next governor. Delegates met last weekend to pick their candidates for the state's top offices. Mike Braun wanted State Representative Julie McGuire as his running mate, but delegates chose ultra-conservative pastor Micah Beckwith as the GOP's nominee for lieutenant governor.
I want to be a unifier. I want to extend an olive branch. I want to make sure that, people are heard. I think the conservative movement, the grassroots movement that I'm a part of, I believe they feel unheard.
Beckwith, self-proclaimed Christian nationalist, built his campaign on the idea of being a check and balance to the governor. And he says the convention result further exposed divisions in the Republican Party. Less than 48 hours after Beckwith's stunning upset, Republican Party Chair Anne Hathaway and Executive Director Joe Elsner announced they were stepping down. Hathaway's been in the position for less than a year, but in a statement she wrote that she and Elsner only agreed to serve in their roles on a temporary basis. Meanwhile, Democrats see this as an opportunity to expose what they call cracks in the Republican Party's foundation.
We cannot turn Indiana over to extremism.
Democratic gubernatorial candidate Jennifer McCormick is a former Republican office holder, and she says Republicans nominating Micah Beckwith is the kind of thing that made her leave that party. McCormick faces a huge financial disadvantage in the race against Braun, but she says resources have been coming in more easily since Beckwith got the nod.
But also we are very strong in a grassroots coalition. So we are relying on those folks who will go talk to their family and talk to their neighbors.
In a leaked memo, conservative attorney Jim Bopp warned of several negative effects of Beckwith's nomination, including concerns that Beckwith will cause division and chaos and undermine Braun's leadership.
My running mate can say whatever he wants. If it doesn't make sense, if it doesn't resonate, remember, I'm going to be the governor.
Now, Braun says he and his running mate are working to align their messaging. Now, meanwhile, Jennifer McCormick has selected former state lawmaker Terry Gooden as her pick for running mate. Gooden is a former school superintendent and 10-term state lawmaker. At the State House, he voted to ban gay marriage in 2011 and was a regular vote against abortion. Now, he says his gay marriage vote was wrong and that the U.S. Supreme Court's reversal of abortion rights was an all-out assault.
We must do everything we can to restore the rights of women to make decisions about their own body.
Now, Gooden will have competition for the nomination at the Indiana Democratic Party convention. Two others, Bob Kern and Cliff Marsiglio, have also filed to run for lieutenant. We're joined now by State House reporter Brandon Smith for more on this crazy week in state politics. Hi, Brandon. Thanks for being here. So Beckwith was not Braun's pick, and he's been heavily criticized, but reaction to McCormick's pick of Gooden has also been mixed. You've interacted a lot with Gooden over the years at the State House. Can you elaborate on his experience?
Well, there's no doubt that Terry Gooden has more than enough legislative experience for the role. He served 20 years at the State House, including a stint as the House Democratic leader. But he was also perhaps the most conservative Democrat there. As we pointed out, a regular vote against abortion rights, a vote against gay marriage in 2011, a regular vote in favor of loosening gun restrictions. He is changing his tune on some of that, but now he'll have to convince Democrats that in 2024 he represents what the party stands for.
You know, as we saw with Braun, convention delegates could nominate someone other than Gooden, right?
It's definitely not a lock, for sure. Now, two others, as we pointed out, so far have filed to run. Bob Kern is a perennial candidate who runs for offices all the time. I don't think is being taken very seriously. But Cliff Marsiglio is more of a political activist. He ran against he ran for mayor of Indianapolis against Joe Hogshead last year. But I think the real wild card here would be Senator J.D. Ford. He is the first openly gay member of the General Assembly. He's mulling a run for lieutenant governor, and he could be a real challenge to Terry Gooden at the convention.
So how unusual is it for convention delegates to select a lieutenant governor that's not the gubernatorial nominee's pick?
It has not happened in anyone's memory. The closest you can kind of find is 1996, when Republican gubernatorial nominee Steve Goldsmith didn't express a preference, which led to a bit of a free-for-all at the GOP convention. But otherwise, this is a real outlier.
I wanted to mention this. You know, the leaked memo from conservative attorney Jim Bopp shows at least some members of the GOP really worried about the November election and how the Braun-Beckwith ticket will affect other Republicans on the ballot. Do you feel like there are real concerns there?
I think that some people certainly have those concerns, but I also don't think it might ultimately come to anything when it's all said and done. First of all, Braun will still be at the top of the ticket, and as much as they will shine a light on Micah Beckwith as his running mate, it's really going to be about what Braun wants to do. And the reality is also there are a lot of people in the state who are not only fine with what Micah Beckwith represents, but actively support it.
And then just really quick, what do you think the next few weeks are going to look like in the governor's race?
On the GOP side, we'll start to get a sense of how Braun and Beckwith will work together. On the Democratic side, it's Terry Gooden trying to convince Democrats he's one of them.
Brandon, thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe.
Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. Some students are spending their summer working on their reading skills to pass the state's high-stakes third grade reading assessment. And Indiana University celebrates the Juneteenth holiday for a third year. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
I hear the echoes all through the meadows. Breathe in and let go. That sweet surrender. I've been running all through the night. You can knock me down, but I've got my will to survive. Rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up, like a mountain high, like a waterfall. Through the wind, I'll be standing tall. Rise up, rise up.
Together, we can make real change happen.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. Indiana lawmakers passed Senate Bill 1 during the recent legislative session. It says third graders who don't pass iRead can advance to the next grade. Literacy rates have been declining for the last decade, but as Benta Boutier reports, some educators and parents worry about unintended effects of the bill.
After dinner, it's time for cards with Sean Diltz, her husband, and 4 grandchildren who live with her. It's all fun this evening, but Diltz signed them up for online summer school, which starts soon.
Mostly just so that they're better prepared for the next grade that they're going into, especially their speed of reading and reading comprehension.
A couple years ago, her granddaughter, an incoming 5th grader at Binford, just barely missed the mark to pass the iRead test. The Monroe County School District suggested summer school then to prep for a retake.
I just arranged to be able to work with her, and then she was able to retake the test, and luckily she did well with the test and moved on to 4th grade. But still, just reading comprehension with COVID, I think, has affected the kids.
Nearly 20% of state 3rd graders did not pass the test that year. Senate Bill 1 becomes effective for the upcoming academic year. 3rd graders must repeat the grade if they don't pass the reading proficiency test, with some exceptions. Diltz says the measure doesn't account for test-taking ability or a teacher's input on what a student's learned.
The students may do great on their work for weeks leading up to that, but that's not taken into consideration.
She worries the law will pressure teachers to use more class time to teach to the test. About 40 minutes down State Road 37, 36 3rd graders gathered in Parkview Elementary's lunchroom in Bedford for summer school. All retook the iRead exam this month. If these students don't pass their summer retake, they'll receive individualized instruction during the school year and retake the test in 4th grade. They are the last class where this will be the case. Most students who do not pass will not be allowed to advance without a passing grade. Most schools give the test starting in 2nd grade and then again in 3rd. The state's retention policy goes into effect for incoming 3rd graders this academic year.
Starting next year will be very pressure-packed.
Lemons taught one of the 3rd grade summer reading classrooms for North Lawrence Community Schools. He's taught summer school reading a few years. For a lot of kids who don't pass iRead in 2nd or 3rd grade, he says reading comprehension isn't the issue.
A lot of the way the state asks them to engage in reading is not familiar to the students. So just kind of walking them through the metacognitive approach to taking some of those tests can be helpful.
For other students, problems may include focus, time on task, or trauma-based factors. All 5 North Lawrence Community Elementary schools are Title I. In the 2022-2023 school year, more than 84% of its students passed iRead. The corporation had a higher passing rate than surrounding districts. Tricia Hudson credits their educators' science of reading and a strong summer school program.
I feel like all of our elementaries are very well aligned in their efforts in their core instruction and remediation or tiered instruction.
Hudson says holding kids back raises funding issues. Districts can apply for reimbursement from the state. In 2015, more than 270 schools participated in the state's reimbursement program. 40 schools joined by 2022. But the average student-teacher ratio must be 15:1 for reimbursement. Hudson says that needs to be smaller.
We would never have an intervention group during the school year of 15 students to 1 teacher. That's just unheard of. So usually we want to keep those groups at 4 to 6 students per teacher if we're talking intervention. And that's truly what the summer school would be. It would be an intervention. So those guidelines are really difficult to stomach.
Her district scaled its summer programming back to only the pre-K Jumpstart and 3rd grade reading this year because of federal funding cuts and an end to COVID relief. But she credits the state with allocating $185 million to support regional reading programs in summer school this year, across more than 80 counties. She appreciates grants offered by the state for the science of reading. iRead scores for this year won't be released until August when summer retakes are done. Diltz's grandson, an incoming 3rd grader, will take the reading proficiency exam this year. She's considering moving him to Clear Creek Christian, a private school. He started kindergarten during the pandemic 2 years ago, and Diltz thinks smaller class sizes might benefit him.
So that he will be prepared for a number of things, but definitely for the iRead 3.
She says she supports the state's efforts to raise scores, but doesn't like the absolute of holding a child back. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Ben Taboutier.
And now Lucas Gonzalez joins us for more headlines from across the state. Hi, Lucas.
Hi, Joe. A judge this week dealt a blow to the city of Bloomington and its attempt to annex a large swath of the county. The ruling applies to areas 1C, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The case centered on the state's 2019 annexation law, which invalidates remonstrance waivers more than 15 years old. Landowners signed these waivers, giving up their right to challenge annexation by the city in exchange for getting connected to Bloomington's sewer system. The city argued the 2019 law violates U.S. and Indiana constitutional provisions, preventing the state from breaking existing contracts. But the judge ruled that the Constitution is meant to protect contracts between private parties, not governments. A spokesperson says the city of Bloomington is deciding whether to appeal. Central Indiana community organizations are working to alleviate medical debt for families. This week, they've announced that they've helped more than 112,000 Hoosiers. In total, they've relieved more than $200 million in significant and compounding medical debt. United Way was one of the community partners.
While a one-time investment will have a ripple effect for families and community, it doesn't address the root causes of medical debt or financial hardship.
The organizations plan to continue advocating for policy changes related to 4 areas: strengthening charity care policies, limiting damage to credit scores, controlling the cost of care, and addressing billing and collection practices. A 73-year-old Indiana man will serve 2.5 years in prison for his role in the Capitol insurrection. A judge sentenced Dale Huddle of Crown Point this week. In addition to prison time, Huddle will also have to pay more than $3,600 in damages to the Capitol grounds and serve 2 years of supervised release. According to a police settlement, Huddle injured 2 officers when he struck them with a flagpole. Voting rights groups are worried about a plan by the Secretary of State to increase the police presence at polling places. Diego Morales says law enforcement is needed to protect poll workers, but voting rights advocates worry particularly about communities of color where policing at polls has a sinister history.
There was a technique used for years here in Indiana in certain communities where, in an effort to suppress the vote, police cars would be parked outside of polling places with the help that would keep certain folks from coming inside.
Vaughn says she and the other organizations hope to meet with Morales to discuss other election worker security options, including de-escalation training. An Indiana University Athletic Center is coming to downtown Indianapolis. The state provided most of the funding for the $110 million athletic center. The center will seat about 4,500 people. IU Indianapolis Jaguars and high school athletes can use the space. And Joe, IU's president, says the project will contribute to the growth of the IU Indianapolis campus and help connect the school to the community.
All right, it'll be interesting to see that go up downtown Indianapolis.
Sure will. Yeah.
Thank you so much. On June 19th, 1865, the last group of enslaved Americans received news of their freedom after Union troops landed on Galveston Island. It's been a holiday in Texas ever since, and in 2021, it became the newest federal holiday. As George Hale reports, IU's Neil Marshall Black Culture Center invited folks to the Bloomington campus this week to celebrate.
The celebration at the Black Culture Center felt a lot like attending a big outdoor picnic.
I look at Juneteenth like a big family reunion. That's essentially what it is, a big family reunion. And so we invite our friends, our neighbors, our campus partners to come and celebrate with us.
There were games, dancing, and lots of food.
This celebration is for Black people, white people, Asian people. It's for everybody. We celebrate all together, but there are some traditions that are in the Black community, such as for Juneteenth, we eat barbecue. You see a lot of red foods, and so we have like red velvet cake, we have barbecue, We have red drinks.
Attendees also held a traditional cakewalk, a game that's something like musical chairs with cakes baked by members of the community up for grabs. This year's event also honored about 400 new scholarship recipients who are arriving as freshmen starting in the fall. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm George Hale.
The city of Bloomington hosted its Juneteenth celebrations last weekend after officially acknowledging Juneteenth for the first time last year. The Bloomington Starbucks on Indiana Avenue is the latest in the state to unionize. Workers voted 15-1 to join Starbucks Workers United. Now, workers say they're seeking better pay and job security. This is the second Starbucks location in Bloomington to unionize. That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Maller-Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnerships with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. Smithville Fiber Internet Security Solutions and Voice in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Bunger and Robertson Attorneys at Law, utilizing 75 years of experience, knowledge, and resources to help individuals and families recover in personal injury matters. Information at lawbr.com. And by WTIU members. Thank you.